Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Doug Reynolds is the founder and CEO of Low Carb USA. The original organization was founded in the beginning of 2016 with the initial intention of providing a platform through annual conferences for internationally renowned scientists and medical practitioners to present the ever-increasing body of evidence on the benefits of reducing carbohydrates in the diet and adding in healthy fats. Doug felt that education about the power of the low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet for the individual who may not get the information from the medical team or from mainstream nutritional advice, and for practitioners who may be then able to prescribe it in their practice, was absolutely critical. However, his mission quickly evolved when he realized how important this was to the medical professional community. Doug realized that valuable tools were needed, not only to provide hope to their patients to reverse and prevent disease, but also to restore hope for that very practitioner. As it is the reason why they went to medical school and got professional training to help people heal and not just to prescribe medications without addressing the root cause of the problem. You can find Doug at lowcarbusa.org. Doug Reynolds, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Hey, Casey, thanks so much for having me, man.
It's such an honor to host you. I had such a great time in San Diego at the Symposium for Metabolic Health. It was absolutely wonderful. One of my favorite parts, I can't say it was my favorite part because I had lots and lots of favorite parts, but one of my favorite parts was how great a job you did and attempted to do at keeping people to limit their questions when it was time for the Q&A sessions. Could definitely tell this is not your first rodeo. You've done this before and know the tendency of people to just ramble on, especially with like personal stories rather than just getting to your question. That was my favorite part. You did a great job.
I appreciate that. It's the part I hate the most because I hate being the bad guy. But I just feel strongly that it's so important, you know, and I have so many people like you that come to me and say, thank you for doing this, because they've been to other meetings and it's anarchy, you know, and I hate it. By the end of the 4 days, I'm done with that. Like, that's actually the one thing when I feel like I'm so glad this is over now. It's that. People always say, I'm sure you're so glad that it's over and everything. And I'm pretty sad that we still can't go on for another 2 weeks, you know, with all the amazing information we get out and the amazing people that we get to meet and talk to and everything. The atmosphere there is always amazing. But trying to keep the Q&A under control is a nightmare. But I keep doing it because, like people like you say, thank you.
Thank you. I understand why you would hate it. I would absolutely despise doing that. But you explain it so well every time. It's like you've got a room full of people like myself who flew in on their own dime on a weekend when I could have been at the beach. Like, I never even saw the beach in San Diego. I'm in this room and this is my one chance to ask all of these wonderful people a question or two. And you get the person who just inevitably wants to tell their personal story and rattle off their own cholesterol numbers and want medical advice. And it's like, this is just not the time and place for that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, there is so much time. I mean, you were there, you see how it works. I mean, there's time at lunchtime, in the evening during the wine tasting and then the dinners. And there's plenty of time to try and what's also amazing is how accessible the speakers are. Anybody can walk up to them and they're more than happy to spend time with you, answer your questions, have a chat with you or whatever, you know, and that's the place to have an in-depth conversation with them, but not at the mic and, you know, in the talk itself.
Yep. No, I really appreciate that. I thought the format of the conference was wonderful, having the speakers talk for 45 minutes and then immediately getting 30 minutes after that to ask them questions and think about things. I thought was really fantastic. And yeah, like I said, not your first rodeo. I believe you said this was your 19th time. So yeah, you've done a really great job. I was really impressed.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I understand you guys used to live there. You just moved to Texas, Corpus Christi. You're enjoying that?
I am absolutely loving it here. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it's just a very different lifestyle, affordable housing. And I think I was telling you off air that it's a small town. And I think it's 250,000 is the population. We've got 6 gates at our airport. And I mean, and we almost always come through Houston to get to Corpus Christi, and you get to Houston airport and there's 5 or 6 terminals with some of them over 100 gates.
Yeah.
And then you fly into Corpus and it's like 6 gates, very laid back.
Beautiful. That's amazing.
That's one of the reasons I came here.
Yeah, that's amazing. You mentioned the housing costs. I was taking an Uber from the hotel over to the conference in San Diego, and my Uber driver was saying, like, yeah, if you want a house like around here, you have to go way into the hills of San Diego. You might be able to find something like small for like 800, 900,000. And I was like, wow, that's pretty steep. At least that's like new construction. And he just started cracking up. He was like, absolutely not. Maybe like a 70-year-old home or something.
At best, most of the time you get something to that price, you're going to need to spend a bunch of money on it to get it sometimes even properly livable,
That's crazy. Wow. Well, you are somebody I have followed in this space for a very long time. Your introduction was very, very much abbreviated. I've known about all the stuff you've been involved with, obviously, with your podcast, with the SMHP. I believe I said that right. Like, you've got so much going on, but even just deep diving further into your content to do this interview today, it's just absolutely astounding, everything that you've been able to do. Like, I heard about this kind of stuff in my career as a trainer, as a nutrition coach. I got really fired up about it. I started this podcast, and I look at what you've done, and I just realize, like, wow, I'm vastly underperforming what can be done in this space. You are doing such amazing work and getting this word out to so many people. You should be very proud of the work you've done.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I am, but then again, I have similar responses as you do sometimes when I look at people like Brian Lenskes, Dr. Brian Lenskes. I mean, he came to an event in 2017, I think it was, and he had been secretly doing keto himself because he had been getting fat and sick like his patients on the advice that he was giving his patients. And he had heard about this and he did it on the down low, started seeing some big improvements, but still wouldn't talk to anybody about it or tell anybody about it, and especially not his patients. And then he came to our event and it was like, whoa, this is like legit, and there's all these scientists and other doctors in there talking about it. He had no idea. And he just got like so committed to try to do something about it as well, which so many of us do. It's like, that's why I'm doing this now. I was just amazed that I had all these benefits and improvements in my health that I didn't even know about. And what can I do to help other people like me know about it? And he was like that. And he did a 6-week thing in his church, like once a week. In fact, he did it twice. It was Sunday morning. And then for the people that didn't want to miss church, then he repeated it again on Monday night. And he had 200 people at each session for 6 weeks. And they all came back each week. And on the last day, I just sat at the back. I often tell people like I was like a proud father, like sitting at the back watching what he was doing. And on the last day, we had a bit of a few of us like sitting on the stage and just having general questions and stuff that we answered. And then sort of we kind of ended that and said, okay, well, we need to give up this hall now. And the people all came down off the stairs down to the stage, and I was just sitting on the edge of the stage, and people all gathered around. And I can't tell you how many people had just started doing it after the first week with that Brian had done this thing, and now they come 6 weeks later. They've lost a bunch of weight, and their A1Cs come down, and or their blood sugar at least come down. A1C maybe not in 6 weeks so much, but even more than that was people coming like somebody and saying, "Thank you so much for making my husband a better person." Just the difference in their character, almost not their character, but their no longer were they like irritable and grouchy and all those things that change that you don't even think about when you're trying to reverse your type 2 diabetes or something. There's so many other benefits that you don't even dream about. And that was the first time that I realized how because we didn't hear it so often from our attendees, but like when I saw this in this group of 200 people, how much of an influence Brian had had on all of these people made me realize what maybe was going on, with those people that attended our events. And then Brian got he tracked down Jason Fung and Tro Kalasian, and they started Low Carb MD podcast. I mean, they had 1 million downloads in their first year. And it's like 11 million or something now. It's just insane. And I often have the same reaction as you. It's like feeling, okay, well, I thought I was doing quite well until you hear about these stories, Yeah, so
that's
anyway.
Amazing. That's amazing. Well, I grew up religious, and so I don't really do the church thing that well anymore. But that's a church I would belong to. I would get baptized into that church for sure. I'll be in Brian's
Granite Hills or something. I think
amazing.
It's called.
That's great. Yeah, and it's so apparent too. You travel to these conferences, and people are just so nice and friendly, and like go out to lunch one day with Olivia Quadra and Dr. Anthony Chafee and Dr. Rod Taylor, all of them previous guests on this podcast, and they're just nice. They're just kind, fun,
amazing people.
They're just great people, and it's like universal. You don't see many people that aren't willing to stop and chat or don't have amazing stories like you're saying. And so, yeah, it's a very cool, and we just appreciate all of you, everybody who's pushing this message forward. It's really great.
Yeah.
So let's go back and tell your story. You have a very interesting story with all of this. I believe you had your logo flipped the opposite direction. You have the food pyramid.
I did, yeah.
That is.
I don't know if you guys have video, but it's. I don't know. It was just, I was so amazed at what a difference it made for me. At that stage, I was maybe 35 pounds over what I should have been weighing at the time. And that was the main thing. I mean, my knees were getting really sore. I was a runner, and I thought I was just putting on this weight every year because I was lazy and I wasn't running anymore. But it wasn't that I was lazy. I was just struggling, with injuries and my sore knees and everything. But I was hating life. And someone sent me a thing about ketones being an alternative fuel source to glucose. And I had no idea. I'd never even heard of a ketone. This was back in 2015, around July. And I started doing a bunch of research, and I was like, this explains like all the issues that I'm having now. And it even explained the issues of when I was like in my 30s and I was running these 50-mile races, where I would get really, really fit. And on the day of the race, I would follow Tim Noakes's carbo loading regimen for 3 days beforehand. And on the day of the race, I would be standing on the corner thinking, man, I can't even run to the corner down there. It's ridiculous. And so I decided to do this. And, I took Pam shopping, which horrified her. And then I had a list, which she was even more horrified at. But yeah, we went around, as most people doing this have learned. You basically go around the outside of the store because pretty much all the stuff down the aisles is all carb crap, And bought some ribeye steaks and full cream yogurt and heavy cream, which you really struggle to find in a little corner in this huge fridge full of yogurt in that's packed with sugar and everything, which is it started from there, and over 5 months we struggled a lot because back in those days there wasn't really a whole lot of stuff online about it, so you kind of had to learn by trial and error. And 5 months later I was down to my weight of 160 pounds again, and my knees had cleared up. I was running and enjoying it again. And I just said to Pam, like, how is it possible that we didn't know about this? We need to. And I knew there was a couple of little conferences, but there was like 100 people that maybe go there. And And I said to her, like, we need to put 1,000 people in the room. And, San Diego is a good destination in summer. Like, maybe people will come. And we literally built it in 6 months, like from having no website, no social media presence, nothing. The organization didn't even exist until February of 2016.
Wow.
And we put the event on in July, and I didn't get 1,000 people in the room. I got 350. But I was really disappointed. And people had to point out to me that in that environment, in that space at the time, 350 was 3 times what any other conference had done, similar ones. And so, be proud of that. And I think what made me become aware of how important it was how many people were coming to me and saying, when's next year? And other people that were coming to me and saying, you need to do one on the East Coast. And one of our volunteer helpers, they were just friends of ours. They weren't even keto at the time. And they walked into town that the evening we were having our early registration. And they went to go and get something to eat. And they came back and said, you can't believe it. It's like there's people running around in the streets, jumping up and down. They're so excited. They heard them talking about it, like just nattering about how excited they are that this conference is on, and they're going to get the opportunity to see a lot of these people were the speakers were like YouTube famous, type people. So they'd seen them on YouTube, and now suddenly they were going to get to see them in person, and they couldn't stop talking about it. And in fact, I think that excitement was what got these friends of ours kind of interested in even taking a look at this idea and eventually get on board with it.
Yeah. Wow.
So we put the first one on. We got convinced that we had to do one in Florida, so we started planning it and put one on in Florida in January, and sold a bunch of tickets to the attendees that were there, like half price, to come back the next year. And I said, like, I don't even know who the speakers are going to be, but it'll be something like this, but you can buy your tickets half price if you sign up now in the next week. And that helped me pay for the event. I mean, we were in such financial difficulty after the first one that we didn't know how we were going to get out of the hotel. And people have very little idea of how much it actually costs to put stuff on like that. And
can't imagine.
This helped us, because we were planning on 1,000 people. I thought we put it on and 1,000 people will come, right? But it didn't work. It didn't work out like that. So yeah, we were really struggling, and we learned a lot of lessons there. So we went to a hotel the next time that is the same one that we're still in now, but where they didn't rape us, basically. That they understood that we were pretty much a nonprofit organization, and that they needed to work with us, and they found ways to save money and not charge as much. And hundreds of thousands of dollars less that we ended up paying at the next conference.
Yeah.
And slowly over the years, we've been trying to climb out of that hole.
That's amazing.
We were talking like 19 conferences now. We've done mainly San Diego and Florida, but we've done one in San Francisco, one in Seattle. We've done a one-day one in West Virginia. And then we did one where I took some speakers over to Jakarta in Indonesia.
Wow.
That's a whole separate podcast just to talk about that experience. It was just incredible.
Amazing. Wow.
But yeah.
No, that's awesome. You can tell the impact you've made, in particular in San Diego, because the local restaurants, anything around the hotel, they all had special menus. They knew what was coming. People are going to be making weird orders. And I really appreciate that, because living this kind of lifestyle, it is a little bit weird. Like, I've been carnivore for 4.5 years, and I love the way it makes me feel, but I don't love what it does to me socially, and like ordering food when I
Yeah.
go out to lunch with my dad once a month. It's just it's a little bit weird. And so,
Yeah.
you're talking about bringing together all of these people who feel like they're in a silo and kind of trapped up against something that's making them feel amazing, but also something that everybody thinks is going to give them a heart attack. And so you understand that all these people get together, and yes, I get to see on stage somebody that I follow, somebody who changed my life and the life of my family. It's
Right.
absolutely wonderful and so awesome to get that support and know that there is community. There are other people out there who are suffering through the same things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think that's the thing that kind of keeps us going, when we see that and we think, okay, it is worthwhile. It is worth all the stress and the drama, and we really are making a difference. And
Yeah.
I think everybody in this world feels like they would like to make a difference. And when you can really do that, it's very rewarding.
Pretty special. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we do have one thing in common from your story, which is at some point learning that you can shift the metabolism from carbohydrate based to fat based. When I was using metabolic carts and measuring how people are utilizing carbohydrates and fats for many, many years, didn't know there was much of a difference. I just understood as a cyclist, if I didn't eat the oatmeal and banana before I left, I didn't have the goos and the gels and the shot
Mm-hmm.
blocks and the Cytomax and all the other sponsors we can lose from this episode, with me on my ride, I would bonk. And hearing in 2012 was the first time I heard the message that you can manipulate the diet and shift the body over to burning fat as a fuel source versus burning carbohydrates as a fuel source. It was
Mm-hmm.
mind bending. I couldn't even like comprehend it. It's such a weird story. So before we go on and continue talking about your conferences, can you tell us a little bit about that? Can you go into the science of how the body shifts from burning carbohydrates to fat and why that's so beneficial?
Yeah. So, basically what happens when you start reducing the amount of carbohydrates down below a certain threshold. For some people, a lot of people, it's around 50 grams a day. Some people need a lot more to actually get it to change. But what happens is that now your body doesn't have this glucose to turn into ATP, which you need, which your cells do to create this energy that you to live and move around and whatever. And so it starts trying to come up with an alternative. And what it does is it starts to process ketones in the liver or fat cells. It releases fat into the bloodstream, which then get processed in the liver to become ketones. And this was a thing that I'd never even heard of before, And so the ketones can then basically get metabolized in the mitochondria in your cells and create energy as well. And especially for your brain as well. And what it turns out to be is that it's actually a much preferred energy source to glucose for your body. And that's why so many people report the fact that when they go on this diet and they reduce the carbohydrates and they start becoming ketogenic, their brain fog clears up. And I found that, like, I get up like really early, get up at 4:30 in the morning, and I literally walk in here and sit down and start working. I don't even have a cup of coffee, and my brain's on fire, And so that whole shift from your metabolism basically shifts from predominantly burning glucose to burning very, very little glucose. There's a tiny little bit of glucose that your body requires for certain metabolic functions, but it's literally a teaspoonful in your entire bloodstream.
That's right.
That's the quantity, right? And the rest of it can function completely on ketones. And what I've also learned fairly recently is that, especially if you're an endurance athlete and stuff like that, your body actually becomes adapted at metabolizing fat itself in the mitochondria to produce energy. So it's not only turning a lot of the fat into ketones, but it's then metabolizing the fat itself to produce energy. And glucose is out of the picture completely. It's a tiny little bit that's there to to keep some of the metabolic processes going, but it is not there to provide fuel.
That's right.
And that's what we're still struggling to convince so many people about, right? Because we've been brought up and brainwashed to believe that you have to have carbohydrates and all that rubbish, to the extent that most of the doctors still advocate that and are insistent on it.
Yeah.
And I still find that hard to believe when they're confronted with all the evidence that actually exists now, that they still refuse to acknowledge that this is at least something that they should consider offering to some of their patients, at least, if not everybody, as an option.
Have a think about it. Like sit down and think. Like, as we evolved, like, go walk outside, go walk anywhere around outside. It's the end of summer here. Like, you could do it even here. There's plants growing everywhere, and there's nothing to eat. You can't live on those foods. Maybe if you find a fruit tree, you can have some, but how are we going to survive as a species unless we had a way to use a longer term, more sustainable type of fuel, which is fat? And you described how the body reduces its need for carbohydrates. And we've known this for 40 years, 50 years. The George Cahill studies, where he fasted people for 40 days, and it shows how the necessity of carbohydrates reduces so much in the course of a fast. Really, it's like 20% of your brain, red blood cells, part of the kidney. That's about it. The rest of the body can burn fat, can burn ketones. It does so quite happily, and everything gets better. And I often lament that one study, if that was in my nutrition coaching certification, that would tell you more about metabolism than almost the whole rest of the book. Yet they only have one sentence that even mentions ketones and ketogenesis. Like, it's crazy that it's not brought up.
No, I don't know. I'm actually speechless. That's actually that is it. So I'm so often can't understand how people just and there's no evidence for any of this sad diet, high carb crap. No evidence, and yet there's an enormous amount now. More and more people doing studies to show that this is that this is a beneficial to, I'm even prepared to say, most people, to some extent. And it's just not happening.
Yeah. It's really sad. But again, what your work is doing is exposing that to more people, getting people together. The content that we're getting from these conferences is top-notch, world-class, that eventually gets released onto more public platforms, which is fantastic. As you reflect on these 19 conferences that you've been able to put on, I'm going to put you on the spot and just ask, do you have like 2 or 3 maybe like favorite stories or moments that came from those conferences that really, really stand out? In fact, I would love to hear, even if it's an entire podcast, just a little bit about the one in Indonesia. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I think we should talk about that sometime. It is pretty amazing. I'm trying to think. Well, I don't know. One super cool thing that just happened at this last one. I don't know if you were there for the last day, but one of the attendees that was there, she's actually a doctor, and I think she'll be okay with me saying that, but she's pretty large, right? And she's just recently come across this concept of the ketogenic diet, and she started to do it herself. And so she's just started her journey, and she came up to me and she asked to do like a selfie picture, and she said, "I'm going to come back next year and do another one." And she asked me if there was any chance that she could get up on the stage at any time. And I found a couple of minutes on Sunday to get her up there. And she basically said, like, "Look at me, and I've just found this. I'm a doctor, and obviously most of my patients were finding it hard to believe that I could talk to them about nutrition and what was healthy and stuff. She and her friend they've started a YouTube channel, which I don't unfortunately know the name of right now, but they are documenting their journey over the next year, and they want to come back and basically get on the stage again. We're going to put up a picture of that picture she took with me at the back of the room on that first morning.
Wow.
Yeah, it gives me a lump in my throat, like every person that's just one person, and I know there's so many that we get to affect. One of the things I often use in my opening speeches, opening talks, is a lady from the Czech Republic called Pavla, and she came to our first event in 2016. And around the time we were about to have the next one a year later, she wrote something on our Facebook page saying, like, I just want to tell my story, and that she had heard about this ketogenic way of life. She tried it for herself and found it very, very beneficial. And like the rest of us, she wanted to teach other people. But there was like nothing about it in Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic. And she just didn't know what to do. And then she heard about our event, that there was an event going to be in San Diego a few months later. And so she decided, even though it was 10,000 miles away, it was really important for her to be there. And she came, and she said she was so inspired that she went back and she immediately started a Facebook group. And she said, we only had a few members, but she said, I'm proud to say that now the way that the signups are going, based on that rate, this coming Sunday, we will hit 10,000 followers. And she said, 1 follower for 1 mile to San Diego. And now, a couple of years ago, I think it was 2020, when we did the virtual one, we contacted her to find out how things were going. She was up to 250,000 followers.
Incredible.
And we tried, but we didn't manage to get hold of her before this event, because I wanted like an updated number, But I reckon it's not going to be long, if she hasn't already hit it, that she'll have 1 million followers. There's 1 million people in Czechoslovakia that are being exposed to this now because of one person that came to our event. And it's stories like that just inspire me.
I got chills. Yeah, that's incredible. The ripple effect of that one life changing all these other lives. And then, one of my favorite things to hear about is like, I maybe helped the wife with something, but then I learned a few months later that the husband started doing it, and so did the kids, and they all feel better too. Like, wow, I didn't even work with them. It's incredible to see how that ripples out. That's absolutely amazing. I'll connect with you offline, and let's get the name of the woman and her YouTube channel. I'd be more than happy to tag that in the show notes.
Our listeners her name is Dr. She calls. I don't even remember. I don't think I ever got to know her real name, but she calls herself Dr. Cami.
Dr. Cami.
And if Dr. Cami, and if you look it up, you'll probably find it. But I will definitely go and look it up and send it to you. Yeah. So if you could we can give her a plug for that as well. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for the listener, that will be in the show notes, so you can go and check that out. That sounds wonderful. Yeah. I can't believe I missed that. As you and I know, that Sunday there was, Hurricane Hillary.
There was a hurricane coming. You got it.
It was a mild rainstorm. The storm had diverted, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But travel plans were kind of changing, and mine were changing. I had to bail a little bit early, and I ended up missing that moment. So that's too bad. But what an amazing thing to experience and to take, again, so much pride in, that you were able to.
Yeah, and the other thing is that. Thinking of that is that you have access to the videos, right? So if you go, actually no, we got it. She asked for it. We actually got the IT guys to cut out their little talk from the stage, which has been cut out of the individual videos now. So you wouldn't see it if you didn't see the whole live stream. But I can send that to you.
Oh, wonderful!
And there she talks about their little
wonderful.
journey that they plan to go on this next year.
Wonderful. Good for her for being so vulnerable about something. You know, it's brand new to her and she's just learning. That must be incredibly intimidating, especially as a medical professional, to be learning that what you've done up to that point, you're looked at as like the most educated person on the planet, and you're unaware of this stuff. To be humble enough to be able to you know, learn about this stuff, show up to these types of conferences, and then, you know, provide the content, go onto YouTube and talk about your journey. That's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah. I think the one other thing maybe memorable for me was 2021 in San Diego, when it was our first event back, because they made an announcement that things were opening up again in May of 2021 in San Diego, maybe most of the country, but definitely in San Diego. And because we have a contract with the hotel for many hundreds of thousands of dollars to put the event on, we can't bail out of that, because we then owe them that money. So when COVID hit, because that's considered force de jure, right? So then everything got rolled over to the next year. But now they've announced in May that they're opening up again. And our event is now kind of middle of August, a couple of months away. Now we start scrambling to try to organize an event. And we started to actually get, so I told everybody that had tickets that they could be rolled over, but most of them still didn't want to travel. But then we actually got, from people that did want to travel, we got quite a climb in our sign-up rates. It was quite impressive. Wow. And then Delta hit. And we literally did not sell one more ticket.
Wow.
Until the event. And we arrived with our truck and everything and unloaded into the meeting planner room the couple of days before the event. And I remember looking around and thinking, shit, like, I wonder if anybody's even going to come, you know? And there was a lot kind of went wrong that the morning of the event, and all the registration was going on outside, and I was sitting at the back of the room at my table, literally buried in my computer, trying to sort some issues out, and some of the things we were having problems with the AV and everything. And the AV guy has a little timer that sits on my desk so that I can see when the next when the end of a talk's coming, when the Q&A is going to finish, when the next talk's coming up. And it was set just to count down to the beginning of the very first talk. And I looked up and it was like 5 minutes. And I looked up from the desk and so I could see the room in front of me, and that was full. Like everyone was there. And that was another lump in the throat moment, you know? Like I got up on the stage and I struggled to talk. It's like, I can't believe you guys came. And you know, again, I think it's all, you ask for three things, and I think all of them go back to the attendees and how important it is, how apparent it is that it's so important for so many of them. And the fact that they, even in spite of the Delta variant that was up and everybody was wearing masks and all of that stuff, but we still did it. Incredible. And yeah, and people came. The people came. That meant so much to me that they came.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah. This community is so awesome like that. They're just so supportive. You look at people like Dave Feldman, who, you know, he's presenting at your conference and you can hear a pin drop in that room. Like everybody is just hanging on his every word. And to know that a lot of his research is funded by the community. No pharmaceutical company is going to fund the types of studies that he is doing in regards to cholesterol. And it's being funded by the community because they do realize it's so important to support it.
Yeah, and Dave, and maybe if you'll allow me a fourth one then, because that's one thing that's not about the attendees. And that was 2 years ago when Dave, I told the story when I introduced him, you probably heard that, right? So 2 years ago, when he had himself found the funding to be able to do this research that he's doing, and it was all a big secret. And he literally announced it from the stage that day, and even put it out there that, hey, you guys can be the first to apply, to be in the cohort if you fit their lean mass hyperresponder parameters. And you were talking about Q&A, and like I'm always having to chase people away from the mic because they talk too long and all of that kind of stuff. But I think he ran up to the mic, was the first person to come to the mic was Steve Phinney. And he literally was gushing over Dave about how impressed he was with what he was doing. And then Eric Western came up kind of at the same time and said something, and Steve kind of didn't go back to his seat. He just stayed there. And then they pointed out Arthur Agatston, who's very famous for the CAC score, and it's actually called the Agatston score. He was one of our speakers there that year as well. And so they called him up. And the three of them stood around the mic that's standing in one of the aisles for people who can picture it, right? And no one else came up to the mic to try to ask a question or something. And the three of them stood around there and basically talked amongst themselves a lot of the time. And Dave was just standing on the stage. And then they would turn around and ask him something. And they just, between the four of them, then they had this conversation that went on for about an hour.
Oh, wow.
It was, I told people when they came in when the next morning, and everyone said, I said, who enjoyed that session yesterday with Dave? And obviously everyone put their hand up, and I said, you guys have no idea how privileged you were to be there for that conversation. And that night, the night it happened, we all had dinner outside on the patio, and we were going back in again, and I happened to end up sharing the elevator with Steve Phinney. And he said, that was epic. He literally used those words. He said, that was epic to me. And he said, that's the best day I've had at a conference ever.
Wow.
And I told the story when I introduced Dave now 2 years later, when he's now talking about his results and that are coming out from this trial, right? And he said he even put a lump in his throat that somebody, what's the right word, that well thought of in our community, thought that of him.
Yeah.
Meant a lot to him too. So that day was a special moment as well, for sure.
That's special. If you know nothing about Dave Feldman, that alone will tell you everything you need to know about him. You're talking about the OGs in the low carbohydrate space that have been doing research and science and clinical practice for years and years and years and years, coming to the microphone to ask questions and chat with a data engineer, somebody who came on to the low carbohydrate scene a few years ago, does not have a medical background. That's how important his work is. And I believe you were at Low Carb Denver this year as well, 2023.
This year, right? I was, yes. I was, yeah.
When he presented the preliminary data, this is the final data, this is just preliminary day one starting data, the gasp in that room of all of those low carb people as he showed the first slide of the data that he was collecting was incredible. I could not believe it.
No, he's doing some fantastic work, and I mean, the story starts really in 2016 when we did our first event, and he was just starting to do this himself, and he was just, at that time, he had done a bunch of tests on himself, and I mean, since for a while before that, he's taken a picture of every single thing he's put in his mouth. Every single thing he's put in his mouth since back in 2014 or something.
Wow.
Literally, even to this day, like, you'll see everything, before he eats or drinks something, he'll take a picture of it.
Wow.
And then so that day or that weekend, he was running around with this laptop in his arm with these graphs showing like how he could basically totally manipulate his LDL levels just by changing what he ate. like huge swings in his LDL just by changing what he ate. And it's like how can people credit this with being some kind of marker for some kind of disease when literally on a daily basis and probably on a sub-daily basis that you can change it drastically. So what does an LDL reading mean?
Yeah.
You know? And it was like he kept like he comes like, you see this, and showing me the graphs, and it was my very first event, and my head was spinning, and I was trying to keep everything on the rails. And it was like, Dave, like seriously, we can talk later or something. And I just kept chasing him away. And no, look at this, look at this bear.
That's amazing.
You know, and how far he's come since then. I mean, man, like his talks just amazing. Yeah. And so. And like you say, I mean, he's an engineer. But I think it's the engineers like Ivor Collins is another one. You know, the guys that are really looking at the research and saying, guys, this is wrong. You know, and this is why it's wrong. This proves that it's wrong. It's the engineers that are the ones that are questioning it. Yep. and doing a lot of the research to try to find what is the right way, you know? Yeah. And I don't know that we definitively have the right way for everything right now. In fact, I'm sure we don't. But at least people are going out and actually trying to do research to prove what we believe, like Dave.
Yeah.
You know, yep. So that then there will be actual evidence, scientific evidence of what it is that we kind of believe is happening because of how people respond to changing what they eat.
Yep. And it's at least starting the conversation, right? Like even at Low Carb Denver, when they would have panel discussions, people would not agree with each other. Like there could be cardiologists that would not agree with each other, but we're having the talks, like we're having the discussion. That's what science is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So grateful for those engineers who know how to see things a little bit differently and aren't so entrenched. That's really wonderful. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the nonprofit that you're involved with.
Yeah, so the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. How much time have we got? I mean, it's a long story about how that came about. But Adele Height, I have to get that bit in. Is that Adele Height? Without her, we wouldn't exist, and she very sadly died last year of cancer, but she was the one that was introduced to me to mediate a talk or a discussion at our meeting in 2018 about what doctors and practitioners were, the experiences they were having trying to implement this in there, the ones that were doing it, like what were their experiences. Gary Taubes was there. It was the subject of his next book. And so he was on the stage as well. And it helped him. Basically, it was like research for him for the book that he was writing. But she had written to me and said, like, her vision was about eventually one day establishing standard of care around carbohydrate reduction as a therapeutic intervention. And one of the things that she wanted to do was create some clinical guidelines for doctors for implementing this as an intervention with their patients, because she felt if there was something legitimate that people could refer to, that they would maybe not be so scared to do it because they were afraid that it wasn't that they were going to end up in court about it or something. And so she talked about standard of care being not something that they learn in college, and not something that they get from organizations, but they get it from it's a consensus amongst the doctors with similar training in a similar environment, what they do in the provision of care. That's how the legal definition of the standard of care is worded. And so she said, like, we don't want to fight with everyone else, and we don't want to tell them that they're wrong and we're right and all of that. But what we want to say is that there's an alternative standard of care. And that if you don't eat chronically eat excessive carbohydrates, your metabolism is going to be different. We talked about that at the beginning. Your metabolism literally changes. It utilizes a different fuel source, and everything changes. And so in that case, the standard of care that exists at the moment for the SAD diet isn't appropriate. And so we have defined one that, everybody, all the doctors in our community are putting their names behind, that will give us that consensus amongst people that do this, that don't eat excessive carbohydrates. And I put 15 very high profile people on a panel that she then wrote the document and bounced it off them until everybody was in agreement that it was ready to publish. And we published it on Low Carb USA at the time because that was all that existed. And a lot of people saw it, but it wasn't the ideal place for it. And eventually it kind of became apparent that we needed to have an organization. Troy Kalajian, who's part of the Low Carb MD podcast, the other half of it, he was talking to Pam in Boca in January 2020 and saying, like, we need to have this organization. Doug needs, I didn't know about this conversation at the time, but Doug needs to start something like this, But I saw him tweeting about it on Twitter, like, I don't know, a month later or something. And I wrote to him and I said, like, what are you talking about? We're trying to do this with Low Carb USA. And he said, well, yeah, but, what we really need is a non-profit organization, like, for these doctors and that to belong to. They need like a home, and like there's the AMA and the ADA and these things. We need to have an organization that we all can belong to and be a part of, and that supports us in what we do. And so, and then COVID hit basically. And so while I was at home, I learned how to create a nonprofit, which was also even more difficult now because nobody was in the government offices and there were a skeleton staff working from home. So wait times and stuff like that were insane. But we built it. We defined a bunch of, Eric Westman was on our board of directors, and it was his idea to call it the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. So we didn't want to call it something about keto or whatever. We didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves like that. And basically anything that people can show with scientific evidence that contributes to improved metabolic health, welcome to the conversation, people talking about light and stress and sleep and all of these things. It's a whole lot more than just the diet. The diet's a very huge part of it, but it's not all of it. And so we defined a set of different pathways that practitioners could become accredited with our organization. Most of it was quite a lot of training. But like if they had been doing it like Steve Finney, for instance, if he wanted to be part of our, be accredited with us, we're not going to ask him to go through a bunch of training, right? But people like that, that's a clinical experience pathway, and they can just write an essay that describes their practice and what they do and how they do it, and asks for a few really successful cases and a few very difficult cases that they've dealt with and stuff. And then they have to do the ethics course, and everybody has to accumulate, some what we're calling CMHEs, as continuing metabolic health education credits, but richly translate from most CMEs that come from, at least from these metabolic conferences, will count towards that. And then they become accredited and they can use MHP behind their names for metabolic health practitioner. And it was one of those things like, oh, and yeah, so we migrated the clinical guidelines over there as well. Now they had a real home. And we launched this thing in December. And it's one of those things like, I've done so many businesses in my, through my life and big projects in that I thought were brilliant ideas. And then you spend so much time trying to do it. And when you come to it, nobody shows up, right? No. And then I was really nervous that this was going to be the same thing, that we thought it was a brilliant idea, but did everybody else? And we put it out there in December 2020. And I think by the end of January, we had over 300 members and over 1,000, because people can go and register there in the provider list. We have a provider list as well. So you can put your name in there and what you do and everything. And there's a whole really fancy search engine that people can search for, people in the area and specialties and all that kind of stuff. But so anybody can put their name in there. But when, in order to become a member, there was a fee. And then we had things like, we do grand rounds, like we get one of these great people to do a talk that's only available to the members. We do that once a month, and those are available to be able to accumulate CMEs as well. And so you need to be a member to be a part of that. And you need to be a member in order to apply for and become accredited. And, we had, by that January, we had about 300 members already. We now just recently, Pam, who I think you're going to do an interview with as well, across the hall here.
Absolutely.
So she is literally the last person that got accredited. And so we got 71 people now accredited. We have tons more in the process somewhere along the line, like getting through all the training that they need to do or accumulating their CMHEs or whatever. And it was like, wow, okay, for once I've done something where I thought it was a good idea and everybody else thought it was a good idea too. So yeah, that's been amazing. I mean, and again, more and more and more we see how many people, in fact, one of the stories that Pam often tells is one of the doctors sent in her application to be accredited, and we went through everything, made sure that she had everything was in order, and the review committee looked at it, and then I wrote back to her and said, congratulations, you've been your accreditation application's been accepted. Here's this super orange badge that you can use on your website and on your communications and stuff like that. And you can use MHP as a credential now as well. And she wrote back and she said, this means way more to me than when I became an MD.
Amazing.
She said, because I finally feel like I can help people now. And yeah, so, wow, okay. It wasn't just me thinking it was a good idea, that actually other people are seeing value in it. And, we got international people that have become accredited from Australia and a few other countries around the world. I've been, in fact, in 2 weeks' time, we're flying to Australia. We've been invited to go and speak at the Low Carb Down Under conference down there.
Great.
But specifically talk about the SMHP and try to help get our membership numbers up. Because I think most of them probably have never even heard of it. Yeah. But this will be a really cool way to get the word out to them that there's an organization that's got their back.
That's amazing. Wow, that's amazing. Such cool work. I wish more people knew that yes, this is a great diet for endurance sport. This is a great diet to lose a few pounds. This is a great diet to help with the niggling like aches and pains that you talked about. But we're also talking about therapeutic carbohydrate restriction. This is a big deal. This is a therapy for people, and it's not being used, or if it is being used, it's only being talked about or used after medications, sometimes several medications. This could be a frontline treatment for so many different things. It's so critical.
It should be. It should be a frontline treatment. It's not even a could be. It should be.
So much suffering needlessly because people don't know about this.
Agreed.
Yeah, and the doctors feeling like they can't talk about it or they're going to get in trouble. Like, our mutual friend, Dr. Timothy Noakes, the trouble that he went through. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Gary Fettke is a great friend of ours and from Tasmania. Same thing,
Yep.
3 years of being struck off basically because he wasn't actually struck off yet, but it was all going through all of this court case and stuff, and so basically his patient numbers dropped off completely because nobody's going to go to a doctor that's in the middle of a court case or whatever, even though they really believed in him.
Yep, that's right.
But it was amazing. He said when he eventually got exonerated, like literally the next day, his card was full again, and everybody came back.
Oh, good.
But yeah, I mean, it's just. But those guys are pioneers. I mean, they've paved the way for others, and in fact, Gary spends half his time now actually helping other people defend themselves against accusations, whether it be legal or otherwise. If they run into trouble where they're being challenged by their local organization or by the government or whatever for advocating this for their patients, like he knows how it all works now. And so, and for free of charge, like he spends half his time helping other people to navigate the legal dramas that they're coming up against.
Amazing.
But that one thing I kind of feel good about is that it's like he's getting less and less work. Like he's set a precedent, and the more of these people win their cases, the more they set the precedent.
Right.
And so these organizations are even if they still disagree, well, they still all do disagree with it, but it's like they're going to spend all this money on lawyers and everything, and they're going to lose at the end of it. So then they just stop challenging people, and that's awesome.
So grateful for those people who really led the way for us and that they're continuing to help others out there. So wonderful. I love that work that you're doing. I want you to talk to the listener who maybe is on the fence about going to a conference, to attend one of these things in person. The listener is so sick of me talking about it pretty much every single episode. I'm talking these things up. For somebody that's thinking like, well, I don't know. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. Not going to be able to make it. What would you want that person to know?
Yeah, we didn't, in the beginning, we had a live stream, but we used to only talk about it like a couple of days before because we wanted as many people as possible to sign up for the real thing. But then after COVID, we did have the live stream. Well, it was completely virtual. But like after that, we realized how many people would still be able to attend these conferences if we made the live stream available. And so it's been a thing. And if there isn't a way that you can get to the conference, this is the next best thing. But if there is any way that you can scrape the money together, beg and plead for the time off, and because it's not just the travel, it's the hotel as well. Unless you're living locally in that city, find a way to get there. Because we talked about it. I talked about it a little bit, at the beginning about all these people running around in the streets, all so excited about the fact that they were here at this conference and it was about to start tomorrow. It's that atmosphere that you don't and can't get from the live stream. It's the discussions and the conversations in the foyer, and we have Dry Farm Wines at our events. We have Dry Farm Wines who providing this sugar-free low-carb wine, basically, that we have wine tasting for with the expo, and people can go and look around the expos and the poster presentations, try a bit of wine, and it's just like this hum of discussion going on through the whole hall and everywhere. And then we all, at our events, we all put on like a special low-carb dinner as well, which each night that we're there. And then you can, people sitting around the table of eight or nine people, and the conversations that go on at these tables. And many of the times you're actually sitting at a table with one of the speakers because, they have to eat too. And so, and that's where people always come to me afterwards and say, I can't believe how nice he was and how easy he or she was to speak to us and give us input and stuff, like in the end, you're just like picking their brains, and they love it too, in a way, so I don't know how many people have come to me over the years and said, like, introduced me, like, this is like my best friend now. We met at last year's conference, and now they're like inseparable, they don't even live in the same state, but they see each other a number of times in the year, and they always meet. They come to both conferences, and so mainly so that they can hang out with each other again, people, you meet people and make connections and get the cell number of one of the doctors that's one of the speakers, because you're asking about it, and they give you their cell number and say, call me like next week about it or something, and we can talk more. And I mean, the inspiration that comes from it, and I actually, you should go and listen to my closing talk as well. But if you haven't ever listened to any of my others, at least in the last couple of years, because I kind of use the same theme of Admiral McCraven, some Navy SEAL who did a commencement speech for the University of Texas. And he talks about changing the world. I think it's in Texas, their one of their slogans is like, what starts here changes the world. And he talks about his experiences as a Navy SEAL, and how those things can translate to everyday life, right? He talks about, and I always tell a couple of stories. He has these 10 lessons about, if you want to change the world, then you need to do this or that or whatever. And just before I start talking about this, I tell people, like, I put this thing on, I take the roadblocks out of the way for all of these speakers to come up, these amazing people to give you the information. But now you've got this information, and I know, and I can tell from the hum, and I can tell that people have had a good time, and they've been inspired. And I'm saying, the main thing for me doing this is to inspire you, because I can't change the world on my own, but all of us together can do it. And so as you go home to your practices and to your families, take that inspiration with you. We can all do better, and we can all do more. But it's up to you guys to go and be inspired enough to do that, to find better ways to work more efficiently, to get more done, and to go back, like I do after every conference, go back and see what I can do next time for it to run better than it ran this time. And I think that when we don't believe we've got any more to learn, or we don't believe there's anything more we can do to make things better, then it's time to check out. Serious.
Wow. Well, that is a wonderful way to end this conversation. I think that would be true of everybody. Questionable if it's true for you. If there's any more that you could possibly be doing is questionable. You're already doing so much. And we're just so grateful for all the work that you've done and for putting on these conferences. And, we know how much time and effort I take that back. We do not know the time and effort, the expense that it takes to put it on. But I think what you just said about being there in person is so true. You're just buzzing for months after these conferences. So Doug Reynolds, this has been an amazing conversation. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Well, thank you very much. So Low Carb USA, pretty much, if you just search one word, Low Carb USA, you'll find Instagram and Twitter and our website and all of that. The smhp.org, Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. If you search for that, you'll probably find it as well. But the URL is the smhp.org, and it's lowcarbusa.org as well. Both are .org. For the SMHP, we've got .com as well, but it actually just points to the .org thing. And just start there. I mean, there's a whole Low Carb USA. There's tons of free videos and amazing inspirational stuff on there as well. Ways to get access to the videos and the talks that from all of our different conferences as well. I mean, if you haven't been there, go and check it out and find ways to get inspired. And that's what I live for now. It gives me more pleasure to see people inspired to go home and do good work than anything else. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Doug Reynolds, thank you again so very much for everything you do. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We really, really appreciate you.
Okay, mate. Thanks.
And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. As always, thank you so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio. I know I say this all the time, but I really do mean it. It has been such a joy to make and produce this podcast and to watch it grow. Our business started in the pandemic in July of 2020, and we started the podcast in October of 2020. So it has been 3 years now, and to see that we have generated over 400,000 downloads worldwide is just simply unbelievable to me. This year in particular has been such a blast to travel to different health conferences and not only meet some of our amazing guests, but also to meet many of you, our listeners and supporters. We really just can't thank you enough. As always, feel free to book a complimentary 30-minute session on our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. On our homepage, there is a Book Now button where you can find a time to speak with us about health, fitness, nutrition, whatever you like. We've loved chatting with people all over the world and many of you out there to bounce ideas off each other or to try to come up with plans to achieve specific goals, or even if it's just to reach out to introduce yourselves, we would just love to meet you and connect with you there. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch these full interviews, and also the shorter interviews on more specific topics that are taken from these full interviews. We've gotten really good feedback over there. It's also a really fun way to interact with people who comment. We read and reply to every single YouTube comment we get. So head on over there if you want to start a conversation and watch these videos. As always, if you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. It really is the best way to make sure this podcast gets out there to more listeners. We've been able to keep Boundless Body Radio ad-free for 3 years and really want to continue to do so. And so your 5-star ratings and reviews are the best way to support us at Boundless Body and support the podcast. Cheers. Thank you again so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio.